Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. You can't pick up the paper or turn on the news without hearing about what is going on at the Jay Peak Resort or the Burke Mountain Resort. Today's guest is Steve Wright, the current general manager of the Jay Peak Resort. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
It's been a kind of a interesting time at the mountain.
That's probably the understatement of the year.
Right.
It's been very interesting. We've had recently the SEC has come in and appointed a management team to operate the resort while they work through some civil charges brought against the ownership group. And recently, as in the last 10 days, we've been working with that team to try to continue operations as they were before, and to continue moving things forward.
You're not a newcomer to the mountain, because the people who are currently operating it they're not from here, but you have a long history here.
Yeah, I mean, shorter than some at the resort for sure. I've been here about a dozen years. I'm going into what'll be my 13th winter at the mountain. We have employees there that have been there for 30 or 40 years. So, when I start to feel like I've been there a long time, I look at them and realize it's really in the grand scheme of things, it's been a short amount of time. But yeah, the management team has come in over the last 10 days. They're from Kansas City, most of them, and they have some experience in dealing with assets like this, like Jay Peak and over at Burke. And so far, they've been real great to work with.
Right. So, there's been a lot of bad news. But during my travels, I am just amazed at that after the shock of what occurred, or what appears to have occurred, just the level of optimism that has just come out of the woodwork. What are you finding?
Well, I think it's normal, fairly normal, to expect that negative response, because the news is unsettling, and I think change in general is unsettling, and people respond to that in various ways, one of them certainly being negative. But I think that negativity is more born from an absence of facts and an absence of what reality is in general. I think as we continue to move along and the facts come out and the reality of the resort staying the same and moving forward comes out, I think people are starting to attach themselves to that more positive optic of what's happening.
Right.
And that optic includes things like, we have 70 weddings on the books from May 1st to November 1st up at the mountain. We have either a hockey tournament or a clinic scheduled just about every weekend for the next 16 weeks. We'll do 11,000 rounds of golf up there. We have a $1 million piece of conference business in the Porsche Club of North America that comes up in the middle of June. And in between all that, we'll be doing 10 or 15,000 visits in the water park. We'll have lodging packages all summer long. We have 3 music festivals scheduled for the summer as well. So, there's a lot to look forward to. And I think that as people start to realize that, the optic goes from negative to positive.
Right. And I think that's the thing is a lot of people here down in the lowlands of Newport and Derby and that, there's a lot of people that have not even been to Jay, because I go up there a lot just because of my work. And I'm often amazed about the people from around the world that you see up there. It's a city.
Yeah.
It's a city within its own, and there's so much going on. And truth be told, there are negative people who will once they become educated, they will start to change. But there's another core group of people. They feed on the negativism, and they almost hope for the negativism.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can't make them happy.
No.
But
I think to the extent that you even try, it's got sort of a depressing aspect to it for the folks up at the mountain. I think that's natural. There are going to be naysayers in any group of folks, and I think a lot of those folks really haven't had any interest or inclination to even come up and see what's happened up at Jay Peak. But I do sort of empathize even with the naysayers that when they drive down Main Street and see an abandoned lot, again, connects back to change. It's different than it once was, even if what it once was pretty miserable. It's different than that, and people react negatively to it.
See, I look at Main Street. I've been here all my life. I look at Main Street and say, wow, Newport's finally, Main Street's finally starting to come around, because I think back to when, I think it was the early 90s when the block was torn down and the waterfront cleaned up to where the state office building is today, and people were there were some people that were up in arms that that block was going to come down, and they started referring to them as historic buildings. You can't, that state office building is just such a beautiful building. Yeah, maybe some people argue they should have done things a little differently, and maybe so. But just because something's, I argue with this people all the time, just because something is old does not make it historic. I am getting older. I'm not getting more historic.
You're not historic.
And that block that was torn down, sorry, those were not historic. I have that block in the evolution of photos. Some of those, they've burnt down. Many of them have had facelifts, and they weren't historic. They were old.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they had become run down, and I think the reality too is that even in the best of scenarios, anybody coming in to purchase that block, the first thing that would have happened is they would have raised the building.
Right.
There's no way that could have been rehabilitated. It would have cost far too much. Right. So we went in there thinking that that was the first step of a multi-step process, and it's just the ownership group was in a situation where we couldn't get to the following steps. But I will say, I've been in Newport for, like I said, 12 or 13 years, and when I first moved up here, my two daughters, and when they were small, I didn't walk on that side of the street when those buildings were there. I tried to stay on the other side, to be honest with you. So there was definitely a negative aspect to that whole area, well prior to it being a whole.
Right.
And I've talked with a bunch of people that kind of like the fact that there's sunlight now that makes its way through onto Main Street in a different way, and that might be just sort of trying to look at it through a positive lens, but. I get it. Like I said, it's change. It's different than what it used to be. And even people who are completely against what we're doing up at Jay Peak, and certainly completely against what has happened down on Main Street, I do feel a certain level of empathy towards them. So.
Right. But no matter what happens, whether it's the current owners or a new developer, that piece of land is ready to go.
Yeah.
It's been all cleaned up. The asbestos is gone. Something is going to go in there, and in the long run, Newport's going to be, people don't like to see a hole there now, but on the other hand is, you take a look at, like communities particularly like Hardwick, you don't remember Hardwick from the days of my youth, the days, that was a hard town, a hard fighting town. It was a proud town, but it was a tough town. Like Halloween was just a nightmare for the cops there. Now you go there, it's reinvented itself, and a lot of times it's because of, I'm not recommending fires for a source of recovery, but they have had fires, and they've been able to build up from those pits. And Hardwick has its reputation built on food.
Yeah, and I think that was built off of local involvement. It isn't the buildings really; it's the people that when they come together and put good thoughts to good actions, that sort of thing happens.
Right.
And there are a lot of good people in Newport and the surrounding communities that are getting together now, that are starting to think longer term about what the potential is there. I definitely want to be a part of that because I'm a Newporter now.
Right.
I live down here, and Jay Peak has always supported those sorts of things. We give tens of thousands of dollars away in water park tickets and lift tickets and lodging packages to support all sorts of things in the Northeast Kingdom, specifically funneled through Newport in many cases. But like I said, I want to be part of all those conversations. I look forward to that.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is I have found that whether it was Bill Stinger or anybody or you, I find that, I'll speak about Bill, is he was always a person that I've dealt with who was willing to help anybody who was willing to help themselves. And some people, I've been involved with the mountain in one form or another all my life. That's where I I learned to ski, because I learned to ski at Chamberlain Birch, which is long gone on the Glen Road. But then, I did ski throughout the years, and then I've recorded as you know, I've recorded the history of Jay Peak at nauseum, every angle you could, and I've always appreciated how much Jay Peak did for the community, no matter who the owner was.
Yeah, no, Bill has been very supportive of that, and I have too. Not only because we both live here, but realistically, it's the right thing to do. I mean, but we need a thriving community for Jay to succeed in the same way that Newport succeeds to the extent that Jay can be a thriving business. It's definitely a two-way street.
How was this was really the year for many people, the year without a winter. And I know that probably weren't quite true with you folks, just because you're higher up. But
yeah,
how did you survive?
Well, the irony is not lost on anybody. The fact that when I came in here this morning, it's snowing out here on at the end of April, when it's of no use to anyone. But we actually, the Eastern ski industry was off anywhere from 30 to 40% at resorts everywhere.
Right.
We ended up, and will end up, at somewhere at 8 to 9 to 10% off. And with hockey tournaments, we've done 40 tournaments this past winter and previous fall, where we had 16 teams a weekend, each team taking anywhere from 15 to 20 rooms. So you've got 300 or 325 rooms every weekend that are secured, that aren't predicated on positive weather. So these people are coming regardless of what it is or isn't doing outside. That sort of protection against bad winters is exactly why we built those assets in the first place. And they performed this year, which was the worst winter in a generation, exactly how we planned them to.
Right. And I think it was great that you had a hockey arena. You have a hockey arena, because, as I've told you before, I'm not a hockey person, but a lot of Boston fans love to learn. When I wrote about it, is we are the home of the founder of the Boston Bruins,
right.
Charles Adams, who
told me that. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he grew up in Newport Town.
Yeah.
And so it only seems fitting that we have a hockey. But what about your water park? And by the way, I remember when you opened, everybody was talking about La Chute, the straight down chute. And I decided my first trip up there, I think it was when I was up there with Louise Guzman, the actor, for some kind of show, and that was the first. I just decided, let's get this out of the way. And I went down La Chute.
I think is how you put it, yeah. What did you think of that? How did that turn out for you?
That was great. My father, on his 80th birthday, he went down La Chute.
No kidding.
And he lived to tell about it.
Yeah, it's a popular part of the park for sure. You have to be a certain weight range. You can't be too heavy and you can't be too light. Just because you need some level of momentum to get around the entire loop. But it's been a thrilling ride, and it's been something that folks look forward to coming back and doing it more frequently than you do, apparently, multiple times.
Well, I've been up. No, I've been up since.
Yeah.
But the thing is, what people don't realize is some local people don't realize, on a cold day, you can go up there and when you're in that water park, you're just like, you could be. You could be anywhere. You could be in Florida. You could be in Puerto Rico. It's just like you're somewhere else.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time researching water parks all over the place before we put that together. And what we really focused on was including as much glass, both in the roof and the windows around everywhere, to really give that sense of the outside coming in. Because one thing, an overwhelming feeling that you get with most water parks is that you're in an airplane hangar. When you don't have enough windows out to the outside, it feels very dank on the inside. So we took pretty great care and great expense to bring in outside light to the extent that we could. It makes it feel like it's like it's a little bit more of an outside experience when you do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, do you have anything to do with the Burke property, or is that out of your hands?
It's out of my hands right now. I try to work with the marketing and operations teams over there, because they are a little bit green right now, and I work with them to sort of build marketing plans, build operation plans. Going forward over there is a little bit of limbo right now, but I have a sneaking suspicion I'll probably be more involved as we go forward.
How are you optimistic for the future of the resort?
Yeah, I mean,
resorts.
I think in general, if you're working in the ski business and you're not optimistic, you're not long for the ski business. I mean, you always have to expect something positive around every corner, right? So I think I have a little bit of that in my DNA anyway, not as much as many people, but certainly more than most. But in terms of what's happening up there right now, the one thing that provides me the most comfort, far and away, the single thing that kept me up at night prior to what happened last week, was our inability to get a line of credit to extend us through the summer and fall period. Every ski resort in the world, whether they make a profit or not, after the ski season, they very quickly go cash flow poor, right? Because the attendance stops. They rely on lift tickets as a form and a high index of their profit. So when that goes away, the cash flow dries up. So every ski resort everywhere has a line of credit. It bridges them from May to December until they go cash flow positive again. Well, it was very difficult for us to secure that line of credit because we were under SEC review at the time, and no banks wanted to deal with us. So now that the receiver has come in and the management company has come in, they are in the process of securing that line of credit that will bridge us into profitability again. So that for me was the most important part of this entire process here, was an outcome that got us assets.
Right. So, and then, it's interesting. Sometimes, I got my start in the media, as in the newspaper world, but sometimes it's interesting to watch the media.
Interesting is a good word.
And just like personally, I appreciate WCAX and all they do, but the Kingdom Con thing, come on, let's just report the news, and no matter how bad or good it is, but I don't think we need the banner of Kingdom Con. Let the system play itself out.
I think when the media turns from a channel to report the news to trying to entertain the viewer, that's where the problem exists. And ultimately, whether you're a radio show, whether you're a TV show, or you're a newspaper, your job is to get impressions and to sell advertising and to sell newspapers. So they're going to try to do whatever they can to get the viewership to pay attention, whether that is necessarily sometimes bending what reality is to fit their own narrative, or in some cases just not reporting what the real story is. Recently what we've seen in the news is this fact that Q Burke and J Peak may not open unless they receive funds. Well, what the other side of that, which happened the same day that most of the outlets were reporting this, was that Q Burke was given and granted the funds that they need to move to November 1st. That didn't make it into most of the papers because it's not as sexy a headline, quite frankly. And we're in that same process right now. The headlines have been J Peak may not open, rather than J Peak is only days away from securing a line of credit that will allow them to open. It's just a different take on really the same piece of fact.
And usually what happens too is then the AP picks up on the story, and then it gets perpetuated.
Right, all of a sudden the Braden Sun Sentinel in Braden, Florida is running a headline that they pick up from an AP wire that doesn't have all the facts, has some completely unfactual statements in there, and they don't, at that point, they're just picking stories off the wire. They're not really doing any investigative journalism that follows up on this stuff,
Okay, we only have about 10 more minutes left, and I know we could go all day on this, but what do you envision for the coming months, or what do you envision yourself as doing? You probably hope to stay around.
Oh, sure, yeah, obviously. I mean, what I look forward to doing short term is stabilizing with the management team, J Peak and its employees. That change that has caused some unrest in the local community has certainly caused some unrest for the frontline and manager level employees up at the resort. So being able to stabilize them is very important to me, and it's one of the reasons that I've decided to stay in this role and do that, because I do feel an obligation to the local community and our employees.
How are your employees doing?
They're good. I think in general they're good. They react a lot in the same way that we as locals do to change and to potentially negative news. Is they get nervous, they ask lots of questions, they start to see stories present themselves across media outlets, and then they react. So I'm sort of been in a constant state of reassuring them. And I think what's going to happen going forward is that we will be stabilized by the time this airs, and we may already be financially. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to operate into the winter. We're already we've already met our season pass sale number for where we were last year at this time. That number continues to move ahead. We have winter vacations on the books for next year. We're booking those hockey tournaments and big pieces of group business for ski and stay packages for next year. But I think one of the things that you'll see, it might be 6 months, it might be 12 months, it could be 2 years, is you'll see the resort sold. I mean, you'll see it picked up by what I would guess would be one of the major ski area operators, which for Jay Peak would be a very, very good thing to be able to bring in, an ownership group that sort of picks up operationally right where Bill left off, and that's with a seasoned ownership group who understand the ski business.
Right. Yeah, because no matter what, Jay Peak is there, and if I encourage people who haven't been up there, even before this occurred, drive up there, because it's a city within its own. It's a life within its own, but it might be within its own, but people like to go there. But, if I go someplace for a week or two, I don't want to just sit there. I want things to do there, but I also want to travel out into the, that's how come Bill, I used to say, Bill, what are you doing? Why Newport? Why don't you focus? And he said, well, we like to have our people have places to go, and that's how come they say.
Yeah, I mean, you see, if you look at our vacation, our typical vacationer 10 years ago stayed 2 nights.
Right.
That was 80% of our audience stayed for 2 nights. And if you look at those same numbers now, it's more like 3.5 nights, almost 4 nights. So people are starting to lengthen their vacation stay. And like you said, you may get a couple of days in at the resort, skiing, water park, hockey. But I, like you, when I go on vacation, I like to spread out and get into the community a little bit and see culturally what the places are all about.
Right, and that is it. There won't need. I would say there's going to be no more expansion at this point. Yeah, that's probably pretty much.
I think stabilization is where we are right now. I'm not necessarily ruling expansion out, because we do have several projects up there that are sort of halfway finished, that any operator that come in will likely finish, just a couple of pieces of lodging. But yeah, in terms of stabilization versus expansion, I think that we're probably in stabilization mode right now.
Yeah, I think the West Bowl is probably going to be sometime out in the...
Yeah, I mean, it's still something that could happen, but you have to remember, we went from about 200 rooms when I first started there, 200 lodging units, to about just under 700. So that's a lot of compression in a short amount of time. So you really need to create the demand for those units before you start to add more.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're in the process of trying to do that. And what I would say is, one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to try to continue expanding those weatherproof assets. One other thing I would love to do is to try to figure out a way to get some soccer fields in up there, because what soccer fields do, just like the hockey asset, it brings in groups of people who need groupings of room that aren't necessarily tied to positive winter weather. We could go from May to November with these soccer fields and soccer camps and fill rooms that we have up there.
Back when I didn't, the fear of breaking my neck wasn't so prevalent. Back when we were younger, I used a mountain bike for a summer or two, as in from the top.
Yeah.
You don't do that anymore, do you?
No, we don't have any defined mountain bike program at the mountain, but that's something else that I could envision a ski resort operator doing that.
Were you around when?
I wasn't. No, it didn't exist back then. I think from what the local myth has, that they discontinued that because of the risk level and the need to bring in a staff in the summer to deal with that. But honestly, mountain biking has become much more approachable than it was even 10, 15 years ago. It's something that family members do, and that would be an asset that I could see the resort developing in the
Yeah, that's really too bad. Mountain biking, I guess I was into mountain biking before it was cool, but I don't bounce as well as I used to back 20 years ago either.
You're pre-cool. That was pre-cool.
Yeah, so, all right, just 4 more minutes left. What more would you like to tell the viewers?
I guess I would just say to stick with us. I mean, and an act of appreciation for those that have, because if anything, after this first couple of days of the oh my God portion of the narrative, I've been really thankful for the amount of support the local community, our skiers and riders, our season pass holders and homeowners, and local communities from Montgomery to Newport. I've been really pleased with the amount of support that I've had personally and professionally for the mountain. You do expect some level of the negative nabobs, they call them, but the amount of support that we've seen has been fantastic, and it's something that buoys every single employee up there at the mountain.
Right. Yeah, because as I told you, the day that this all came down, I probably didn't get any work done because I'd been associated. Bill has been and I still appreciate Bill.
100%.
You know what? I don't know what happened, but I will say Bill has been a firm supporter of mine and my work since the very beginning, and I am going to give him a benefit of a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what happens, I hope the best for him because Bill Stinger has done more than just Jay Peak. He has done more than Burke, and I am really getting tired of people forgetting that. And, I'm not saying that if something went wrong, we all have to pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
But, I read things about him being arrogant, him being oh my God.
Yeah.
What do you know when I used to do articles, he'd say, Scott, don't make this about me.
Yeah.
Make this about my people. There's my little
It's true.
spiel.
It's true. I mean, it would be wise for people to let the facts bear themselves out and to let this process continue before they start casting judgment.
Yeah, because you know what? Is sometimes we need to look in our own mirror, in our mirror, and see what we see looking back at us.
Well said.
So, okay, hey, it was great having you on.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
And when you're ready to come back on, or if your group wants to come on, I welcome you to come on because
we appreciate it.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.